Uh, Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammad Moiz, and I work as a community manager here at Cloudways. And I welcome you all on the final session of today's BFCM Prepathon Day 3. Today, I have with me James. He works as a product manager here at Cloudways. James, would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, I'm James Lee, and I'm a product manager with Cloudways. Please meeting everyone here.
And today, the session is important for everyone who has a WooCommerce site or any online business where speed matters a lot. So today, I have with me Brendan Tully. He's joining us all the way from Australia. He is a consultant at WP Speedfix. Brendan, how are you feeling, man?
I'm good. Good to be here.
All right, so today we will talk about website speed and performance optimization best practices, which will make your BFCM campaign a huge success. So, Brendan, what do you have prepared for us today?
Alrighty, I've got some slides. Should we kick those off? We'll start talking through them.
Yeah, sure. You can share your slides now.
Great. So we'll you guys stop me if we get too technical or if anything's not clear, because this can be very technical.
So for the technical stuff, I have James with me today because I don't want to look dumb. So James is going to help me understand all the technical stuff that you're going to say, and obviously he will have some questions for you as well from the slides.
Fair enough. So as you said, my name's Brendan. I work for I have a company called WP Speedfix. I'm the principal consultant there, and we do WordPress speed optimization. So in the last 5 years, we've optimized nearly 5,000, so over 4,000, but nearly 5,000 now. WordPress websites for speed, ranging from little tiny small business websites to huge publishing sites and massive WooCommerce sites doing millions of dollars a month. So we've seen it all. We've learned a lot. There's probably very few other people in the industry who've seen as many or optimized as many sites as we have. And we've seen all the edge cases, and we still see, solve weird and wonderful problems even today. So that's right. I have more than 20 years background in the SEO space. I had an online store back in the day in the early 2000s and have had an SEO agency since 2008. So we're well versed in site speed, technical SEO, and everything in between. So let's talk about why speed is important. I think everybody thinks they know why speed is important, but just to recap, if we go faster, we will rank higher. Speed is part of the Google algorithm. But not just speed, website reliability is also important, and that kind of goes hand in hand with speed. If you have a fast website, typically it will be more reliable. You'll convert more and make more money. Speed, unlike a lot of areas in online marketing, is actually quite easy to do, and it's easy to measure. There is a lot of confusion out there, but unlike other things like ads and SEO, it's actually very easy to get a result here. And, there's no argument that a faster website's better. If you yourself, if you come across a slow website, you're so much more likely to click away and get frustrated and go elsewhere. Especially it's people who are lower intent visitors or top of funnel, which a lot of Facebook ads and a lot of display ads, those people are very much top of funnel or higher up in the funnel. So they have less intent and they're going to have less tolerance for dealing with slow websites. I think that's all pretty, common sense stuff, but like I said, we have people at all levels.
Brendan, just one thing I wanted to ask you now. So you mentioned how speed is important and why is it important. So in the context of the holiday season ahead, I mean, obviously, people with WooCommerce stores are expecting a lot of traffic on their websites, especially during the Black Friday and Cyber Monday days. So how important is speed for those guys? I mean, how important is it for them to have a successful BFCM campaign?
Yeah, reliability is really, like, a lot of people talk about speed, but reliability is also equally as important because ultimately a website that is offline has zero speed. So we'll talk about some of the reliability stuff. Generally, when you make a website go faster, like adding a content delivery network, you improve the reliability and you improve its ability to handle more load. So it's less likely to go offline. So we definitely have some bits and pieces I'll talk through about that. So most people do speed wrong. Right. So they test one page, usually the home page. They might test one inner page. They do it one time. They use the wrong tools. So typically the ultimate goal is to get a 100 score in Google PageSpeed Insights or an A on GTmetrix, which is not really what they want because that, those tests can be cheated and they don't necessarily reflect reality. And a lot of people, they get a 100 score, but that doesn't translate to a meaningful commercial result. So what we really want to do, we want to look at all pages, because all pages on the site matter, especially in e-commerce, because if you have Google shopping campaigns, most people are not hitting the home page. They're hitting one of the inner pages or a category page to get to products or land on the site. Speed is not a fixed metric. It needs to be monitored over time. So the speed is not fast today and it's always fast. The speed varies depending on what the user's doing, what device they're on, where they're located, even things like how busy the internet is and time of day. So it really needs to be some ongoing maintenance or measurements in there. So it's, consistently fast, or we're aware when it's not fast anymore, and we have a free report from Google that will show us that, and I'll share that in a minute. And we want to focus, instead of 100 score and page speed insights, we want to focus on Google Core Web Vitals. So that's Google's relatively new measure of speed. They released these early to mid last year. So this is a set of metrics. Google captures the data from Google Chrome users or Google Chrome browsers, the real data or the real speed people are getting on the website, and compiles them into something called Core Web Vitals. So that's a set of speed metrics with the real speed experience people are getting on the website. And we'll have that report as well. We'll talk about that in a sec. And if we focus on Core Web Vitals and we improve those, and assuming that you have moderate traffic, or you already have some revenue and the store is doing some business, you should see some meaningful commercial results. You probably rank higher, you'll be more reliable, and you'll convert better. So,
and I like the point that you mentioned. And I like the point that you mentioned that chasing a 100 score or a score actually means nothing. It is a real world speed. I think there is a lot of misconception about web speed and web performance out there, that you need to have that perfect score when it comes to your WooCommerce or any other website. But that's actually not the real deal. Yes, it's the real world speed that matters. Really good point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, agreed. Yeah, there's like too many of those, people who just punch their website in to the page speed tool and GD metrics, and why don't I have like 80 or 90 or A or whatever?
Yeah.
It's like competition out there. I mean, being in the community, I look at people and they're like posting their speed scores, and it's like, if you can top it up. I mean, it's not a competition. It's how your website performs in the real world, isn't it, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's about making money. It's not about getting 100 score. So you see people spend forever focused on the score, but that's the wrong thing to focus on. And you can cheat that test so easily. You guys know there are tools out there. There are ways of optimizing a website where you have a good score on the tool, but in reality it's very slow, or you've broken the website to get that score. So, so let's talk about some tools that we use. So measuring speed, this is generally our tool set here. So uptime and uptime monitoring, those are important. So we'll talk about some free tools in a second for that. Reliability under load. How does the uptime look like under load? If you send a mail out to 50,000 people, does the site crash? Most people don't know because they have no uptime monitoring. And then, like we just talked about, Core Web Vitals numbers. So let's talk about what's fast for a second, what numbers we need to be aiming at. So like we said, 100 score isn't really the goal. What we really want is little to no unscheduled downtime. And unscheduled downtime is the site goes offline and, you're in the middle of a sale, or, you've sent a mail out and it's offline. WordPress websites are going to have some downtime because they need patches and updates. You're going to have to reboot a server from time to time, or, something's going on, you're adding a new plugin and, you have to put the site in maintenance mode. But what we want to avoid is unscheduled downtime. We want the page sizes as small as possible, but they really need to be under 3 megabytes. Generally, a page that's over 3 megabytes is going to fail Google's Core Web Vitals, and it is going to be somewhat slow. There'll be a portion of users it'll be slow for, just because of the physics of downloading 3 megabytes of stuff. Someone's on a pretty ordinary 3G connection, and something goes wrong or they're slow. Time to first byte. So that is how quickly the server starts sending stuff after you request it. So really, that needs to be 0.1 to 0.3 seconds in the country the site is hosted in, and then half a second internationally. And then we have FCP, which is the start of the render, under 1.8 seconds. LCP, which is the Core Web Vitals metric for speed, that is the end of the render, or that's when the user perceives the page as having finished loaded. So that needs to be under 2.5 seconds. First input delay, under 100 milliseconds, and CLS, which is cumulative layout shift, under 0.1, which is not speed, but it is the stability of the page when it loads.
So just one question on that note, Brendan. On the first point, you mentioned that little to no unscheduled downtime. So as someone who has been working in the hosting industry, and James can relate to that as well. So downtime is something that a user usually depends on its hosting, right? So when a server is down, that is usually counted as a downtime. And the second point, which is page size. So page size is something that a user can control. Obviously, they can use speed optimization, image optimization tools to make sure that the image is under a certain size. But how can someone control downtime? I mean, is it not completely dependent on the server or the hosting?
Well, that's a good question. So you've got a few different things to think about there. So most hosts will say they have 99.9% uptime, which they do, or even better. But that's the server uptime. The website uptime is something different. So the server can be up. If you send 10,000 visitors to the website in one go, that might knock it over and it might crash. So the server is still up and running. So it's still hitting the uptime metric from the hosting provider. But because you've gone over the capacity, the load capacity of the website, or you there might be something wrong with it, something wrong with WordPress, the actual site is down while the hosting's still up. So most hosting providers have fantastic uptime. That's not really where the issue is. It's where the site, the hosting isn't spec'd, or the site isn't configured to cater for a lot of visitors, or something goes wrong, or a plugin breaks you update a plugin and it breaks the website in some strange, weird and wonderful way. So hosting, certainly hosts go down from time to time, but usually with WordPress, that's not really where the issue is. Usually it's load related or some error, which then you get 502 errors and 504 errors. That's typically, that would be downtime, but that's typically how that would manifest.
Yeah, just that's a good point about like updating a plugin and all, and then something breaks and the website is down. So when it comes to like on a server level, the website is up. It's just that your website is not up because of those issues. So just a quick shameless plug that's the reason we have safe updates. Yeah. So we try to
I like that, James. I like that.
So it's like So nice so we try to avoid that issue. But sorry. Yeah. I'll stop my
I totally agree. And like tools like that are so much better than like so many times that you guys have probably done it. You just want, I need to update this plugin. I'll just hit the update plugin.
So safe updates is the solution over here. Yeah, James.
And it does it better than you can hire a developer to do it who would spend hours doing the same thing as the software does. So,
yeah.
Right. All right. Sorry. So that's all technical stuff. Let's talk about some simple
before
stuff.
That, Brendan, can I just go back and ask one question? Can you just scroll back? So when you say LCP, largest contentful paint, right? End of the render. So does that mean that because I heard you saying that the user perceives that the rendering is complete? So does that mean that is as long as whatever they see is complete, that's fine, or must the whole page be fully loaded when we talk about LCP?
Sure. So there's two metrics. So FCP there is when it starts loading. So that's the user says, hey, the page has started loading. So LCP is when they see it as finished loading. So back in, a few years ago before the Core Web Vitals metrics, there was like load time, and then there was document load time and these sort of metrics, which didn't really represent what the user was experiencing. So LCP, the idea of this metric is to represent the user's perception of the page having loaded. So for the most part, that's them saying, okay, the page is loaded. The next one down, first input delay, is can they use the page? So, okay, the page looks loaded. I go to scroll. Does it actually scroll? Or I click on the menu. Does the menu actually load? So that's what that metric is. So it's measuring how responsive the site is. So those two metrics kind of go hand in hand. So if you have a good LCP or very high first input delay, then it's still going to be a slow or poor user experience. So
got it. Thank you. This is clear because I've been looking at these few acronyms for quite a while, and it's like, what do they mean? Okay. Thank you.
Cool. All right, let's talk about some to-do items, so action plan items. So I think all these are free, actually. They are. So uptime monitoring, we talked about that. UptimeRobot.com is a great tool, and it has a free plan, so it will monitor the site on 5-minute intervals. If you have a reasonable site, you're making money, you probably want the paid plan, which does 1-minute intervals. Usually we say monitor the homepage and say the top 5 pages on the website. That's usually a good kind of setup, especially for a busy commercial site. So that will then tell you if the site is going offline. Often we see sites going offline during backup, for example. They have like a small server. The backup can be quite aggressive when it's dumping the database to the backup. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's particular times of the day when it's busy, 9 a.m. in the morning, depending on what type of site it is. They can go offline, and most people are not aware because they don't have the uptime monitoring. So it can uncover issues with reliability, but then also if you send a mail out, and the site's struggling on the load, it'll appear there in the uptime monitoring, and it'll pick up those 502 and 504 errors as well. So start with a free plan. It's it doesn't cost anything. It takes 5 or 10 minutes to set up. The next one, this is a funny URL. This is the simple way to set one of these reports up. This is a Core Vitals report. So this is a Google report from Google Data Studio, or now they call it Looker Studio. It's a funny name. But this is the average site speed, average speed across the site that this data Google has collated from the last month. So this one's our website from September 2022, so this year. So these are the 3 core vitals metrics. There are other web vitals metrics, but these are the 3 here that are the most important. So the LCP, we want, broadly speaking, these green bars, we want over 75% plus green to get a passing grade. So that means 75% or more users on the website had a great speed experience. So you can see here on desktop for us, 90.9, so 91% of users had a good speed experience on desktop. On mobile, it was 82.5. So we could probably do a bit better on mobile. What we're looking here is to avoid the red. So people in the red had a bad speed experience or a bad experience. First input delay is looking great. There's no issues there. CLS, we actually had a design change the guys rolled out, and it caused some layout shifts. So this is actually a problem at this. Broadly, the site is failing Core Web Vitals. We actually had this a couple of months ago. If you click down the tabs on the left, you'll see we had this issue, and then it was fixed, and then we broke it again. So this is actually something our devs have been working on. But so right now, some of the pages on our website will be failing Core Web Vitals because of this. This isn't speed, but it is how stable the layout is when the page is loading. And the easiest way to think about CLS is when you go to a website and the page loads, and you go to click on something with your mouse, and then suddenly the website moves underneath shifts,
right?
And your mouse.
That's like the worst.
Yeah. So that's what layout shift is. So
especially on mobile, you try hitting on it, and whoops, that thing went down. Like what?
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. Right.
So it's a usability measure because it's really easy to improve the speed if you break the layout, because you can manipulate the CSS in a way that it goes much faster, but then the website looks broken for a second or 2 seconds before it actually loads. So you see that it's called a flash of unformatted content or flash of unformatted text. So that's what that CLS metric is about to a degree. We can also see those other metrics. So time to first byte here, these tabs on the left, it's not a Core Web Vitals metric, but it greatly impacts the rest of the speed. So we're all looking good there. We're mostly green, and then the FCP as well. So these reports are free, so you can set them up so long as you have a minimum level of traffic, 100 or 200 visits a day, in order to generate it. And you actually see competitor sites as well. So there is some data here you can see about, device distribution as well, mobile versus desktop users, and a few other bits and pieces. So you can see most of our visitors are on desktop, not mobile.
So Brendan, one question over here. I think I'm just asking it for the sake of myself and some people out there who are listening to it as well. So what's the difference between time to first byte and first contentful paint? Like, are those two things similar in terms of nature, or is it something that one is concerned with the server, or like what's the main difference between the two?
Yeah, so time to first byte is more of a technical metric. It's when how responsive the server is. So I load up the Cloudways website. It's how quickly it starts sending data back to me. So it affects all the other metrics. So if you have a bad time to first byte, if your time to first byte is 3 seconds, it's going to add on 3 seconds to the FCP time and the LCP time. So often fixing the LCP metric means you've got to fix the time to first byte.
To first byte. Okay.
So and often there's issues there of geography. So if you're a business in Australia but hosted in the US, and you're targeting Australian customers, that's going to cause a higher time to first byte because of the geography. Or you just have under-spec hosting, so you've got a cheap server and you have one CPU and you really need 8 CPUs or something like that. It's underperforming. Okay. Or you don't have page caching, so you don't have a page cache in place where, and for those not familiar with page caching, so that is a cache basically where the pages are pre-built by the server or WordPress, and they're ready to go as HTML files. So when the user requests them, they're ready to go versus having to do the database lookups and process PHP every time when the page loads. So those are usually the issues we see. So caching, server performance or hosting quality, and then geography. And we have some ways to solve those. We'll talk about in a sec as well. So that's the link there to create that report. There's a couple of links, but this one here I like because it is.
I think James has a question, Brendan. James, he tried it a couple of times, but
sorry.
No, just once. I was just looking at the data, and you were saying that you need like 100 users 100 visitors or so, right? So are you telling me that these data came from Google directly, where they, if I'm understanding correctly, they harvest it through like Chrome browsers of users just randomly around the world, and they gave you the data?
So all Chrome-based browsers, not even Chrome. There's a lot of like Microsoft Edge browser is actually based on Chromium. So anytime anyone loads a page, the browser sends the data back to Google, so the speed data. So
nice. So and they're sharing that data with like all of us. So if we know how to harvest that data, okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I think they only capture the top 5 million, or can't remember the number, 10 million websites in the world. So that's why you need that minimum traffic level. So if you only have 10 visits a day, that you're not going to be able to build this report.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But you can try. Like the easiest way is just to load this up, stick your URL in, and it takes 60 seconds to build.
Okay.
So Brendan, building on your answer to my question about the difference between the two. So if someone has, for example, a good time to first byte, so we can assume that the server is functioning properly. The server is doing what it's supposed to do. But if someone doesn't have the right first contentful paint score, what does that entail?
Few different things. We actually have an article on our website that breaks it down in detail how we improve that metric. But so there's a few things. So we need that page caching in place. So that's one. One of the easiest ways to do it is this little trick we have. So the logo of a website is usually the first thing on a page. So many people listening to this will be familiar with lazy loading. So where there's lazy loading in place. So we want to exclude the logo from lazy loading. So it's not lazy loaded. So it loads as soon as possible. And then there is something called a preload tag, or we can use this tag called preload, which changes the priority in which the files load. So we add the logo file or logo URL into the preload, which means it's one of the very first things that is loaded by the browser, which kind of speeds up that metric. So using that technique, we can usually get the FCP time down to 0.6 to 0.8 of a second. So if you go to our website and just search how to fix FCP time, that breaks it down in detail and the plugins we use and our techniques. So okay, let's talk about a few more of these. So we have our tool here. SiteSpeedBot is our speed test tool. And I have an example here. If you go to SiteSpeedBot.com, it'll break down the speed. So it gives you the core web vitals metrics, but it'll also give you detailed recommendations that other tools won't. So this one, I just picked a random test somebody did today. So the FCP time and LCP time are problematic. And then there's a whole bunch of recommendations here. So we actually have a list of hosting providers that we know aren't great. So this one's not on a good hosting provider. It's missing a content delivery network. There's several other issues. So James,
see if Cloudways isn't there.
So we recommend Cloudways is the one the hosts we recommend. So this one is actually.
Don't worry, Cloudways will always be one of the faster ones. Don't worry about that.
Nice.
They just need to make sure
this one's actually in Bluehost. So.
All right.
So Bluehost is on our slow host list.
I'm not sure if we should be mentioning.
Yeah, I don't know if we should be saying that, but that's on there. So.
But I do want to reiterate one point that I think Brendan just mentioned as well. If your server needs like 8 CPU and you only have 1, I don't think anybody can save you from that. So you do need to know if you are expecting traffic, you do need to make sure to upgrade and have more CPU. Even just for a sale or something like BFCM, which is what we are going to have. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the uptime monitoring is really important.
Yeah.
Like, if the server is under spec, or maybe your business is growing, the uptime monitoring will pick all that stuff up. So it's a good way to detect if you have issues, because a lot of customers aren't going to tell you if something's not working. So the site actually might be broken, and for some of the
they may not have a way of telling you as well. Yeah. So yeah.
Yep. Okay, so the SiteSpeedBot's our tool. Google Search Console will give you Core Web Vitals metrics as well. And then for site-wide speed testing, particularly for checking the size of all pages site-wide using Screaming Frog SEO Spider, which is an SEO tool. There's a link there to how to use that tool to test the site-wide speed. And the tool is free for up to 500 URLs. So you can use that for free if you have a smaller site, or it'll stop working at 500 URLs. Okay. So yeah. So then if you remember, the thing we're really looking for there is page sizes over 3 megabytes. So we know anything that's over 3 megabytes is going to be slow almost always. Okay. So that's what we're looking for there. So that's kind of our tool set for measuring performance. Should we talk about some of the basics here? We kind of had 2 levels of speed. And when we think about speed, we think about going from slow to fast enough, and then we go from fast to as fast as possible. So these are kind of the basics that we'd want to check. Someone said my site is slow. These are the boxes we want to check to start with. So we talked about good hosting, close to visitors. HTTP2 protocol support is an important one. There's a lot of hosting out there that still doesn't have this feature. This was a protocol released in 2015 that makes a huge difference to speed. So we still see customers every week that have hosting that doesn't support this. And basically the easiest way to think about this is, with the old version of the protocol, 1.1, if a web page had 100 things to download, the browser or the user had to make 100 connections to the server to download all those files. With the newer protocol, HTTP2, they can download that over one connection. So there's a lot less overhead. So that's a really important one, and a problem we still see all the time. So close to visitors, and then the plan matched to the website. So like we've talked about, the performance, 8 CPUs is well matched to the traffic, and enough memory as well. So I think that, that's all pretty straightforward. Fast DNS hosting. So this one is very often ignored. We see this quite regularly. Customers have good hosting, but bad DNS hosting. They use the registrar wherever they have their domain. We recommend Cloudflare for DNS hosting. They're pretty much one of the consistently the fastest top 3 hosts in the world. If you don't like Cloudflare or can't use Cloudflare, this website DNSPerf continually tests and ranks all the DNS hosting providers. So this ties into the time to first byte, and also the reliability of the website. So if you have bad DNS hosting, the website is going to be slow and unreliable. So that's, nobody really ever talks about that, but that's an important element to to keep in mind. HTTPS, I don't know anybody not running it. Occasionally we see sites not running in secure mode, but this is required for security. If you have an e-commerce site, you need it, but also to make these 2, HTTP2 and the newer HTTP3 protocol work. Page caching, which we kind of talked about already. So the pages are pre-built on the server, ready to go. So Cloudways, you have a plugin for this, or WP Rocket also does this. CDN, Content Delivery Network, Cloudflare free plan would be the basic level here. We'd almost always recommend a CDN for a number of different reasons, even if you don't have a lot of traffic. One, it takes a lot of load off the hosting. So the hosting is freed up to do only what it has to do. So it moves the load, speeds up the site internationally, and then also Cloudflare has a lot of security features, so it can filter a lot of that kind of garbage traffic. So
speaking of Cloudflare, I mean, James knows where I'm going with this. So speaking of Cloudflare, so you said that the free plan is okay, it's fine. But if someone is offering a cloud-based enterprise with their host, so like, wouldn't that be a step up in speeding up a site?
Yeah, absolutely. So the free plan will do a lot, but then the paid plan has proper firewall, image optimization, prioritize routing, and then edge caching as well. So I don't know if you want to add anything there, James. Sales pitch.
No, I think you got all of it. Yeah. So almost all of it. Yeah, better routing. That's true. Yeah. Especially, I think, like when you being from Australia, I think you you may be aware that the free plan does not have as like an extensive routing in Australia because of high bandwidth costs, while the enterprise plan really like covers the whole continent. So yeah.
So
and one more thing, Brendan, on the first point you mentioned, close to visitors. So choosing a data center, that is what you mean, right? Choosing a data center that is in close proximity to where you are operating from. Because I have heard a lot of people say that it doesn't really matter that much, but you have added that in your slide. So according to you, is that like a really important thing to consider?
Yeah, especially if you're just serving one country. So, I mean, we deal with a lot of Australian customers because we're from Australia, and so many are hosted in the US, and you just can't get past the geography. Generally, we say that the site's going to be 1 second slower for visitors outside or international visitors. And we see a lot of UK customers with hosting in the US as well. So if you're in the UK and you're only dealing with UK customers or customers in Europe, you want to be hosted in the UK or Europe. So because you can't get around the physics of geography. So CDNs can help a lot, but you know, at the level we're talking about here, where small business to small enterprise maybe, the geography still matters, and some of the other stuff as well, routing and things like that. Like James said, some countries don't, like Australia, the routing is not great because just of the way the geography and the way who owns the market in terms of providers, network providers.
Yeah, I will just to stop you there, Brendan.
Let's talk through. We'll run through a few of these quickly.
So just to stop you there, Brendan, for like 5 seconds. Just wanted to send out a message to everyone watching this that you can win Amazon gift cards or one consultancy and free cloud-based credits and tools. If you participate in the session, you can find the details in the comments. So make sure that you watch the sessions and participate, and then obviously you can look forward to winning all the amazing prizes that Cloudways has for you. Thank you. You can go on, Brendan.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so image compression at the website layer. So Cloudflare included CDNs can do image compression, but you're always best compressing at the WordPress level first, because that's done one time, whereas a CDN has to continually compress that image every time it passes through or it's cleared from its cache. We use this plugin EWW Optimizer. One of the key reasons why we use that is because it can use the server CPU, and it can use it particularly on Cloudways, because most sites have several CPU cores. You can optimize the entire site in usually less than an hour, whereas if you use a cloud service, it can take like 24 hours for mid-sized WooCommerce site. And also it's free. So if you use the server hardware to do the optimization, the plugin's free. So that's why we recommend that. Lazy loading, which we talked about, we use this plugin Auto-Optimize for lazy loading. And the main reasons for that is because you can exclude the first X number of images on the site from lazy loading, which is important for that FCP metric we talked about, and the LCP metric. You don't want to lazy load anything that appears in the viewport or the initial viewport, which is the section of the site that appears when the website first loads, because lazy loading will slow down the images there. So usually we set that to either exclude the first 4 or 6 images on the page and also exclude the logo. And you can kind of get the best of both worlds there. Backups, so ideally 2 backup systems. This doesn't improve the speed, but if you break the website, then this will get you up and running quickly. If you don't have a backup, you're screwed. So usually we say use 2 backups. So use the hosting, and we also use Blog Vault and the backup. And the reason for that is most backups have quirks where they have gaps, or you might have to restore the entire site instead of just one file. So if you use 2 different systems, usually the gaps kind of overlap and you'll be okay. One of them will be better suited for the type of restore than the other. You might need to restore one single file, and something like Blog Vault is very easy and quick to do that. So that's usually what we recommend. Especially for WooCommerce, Blog Vault also has a real-time backup option, so it'll back the site up as orders are coming through. So that can also be useful.
You can never be too safe with backups. Yeah.
So on Cloudways, it's probably an important thing to talk about. So you guys have a setting to backup. So you do the cloud backup, and you also backup locally. So we'd usually say have the local backup turned on as well. And then if you have a busy site, do the backups every 1 or 2 hours. So you have that backing up there. But I mean, it'll cost you a bit more in terms of traffic and offsiting that. But again, the cost is nothing compared to losing data or the site being offline. So, and similarly, the next one down, renew your domain for 5 or 10 years or the maximum amount of time you can, because we see issues with domains expiring and then sites are offline for up to 24 hours after a domain expires. So that's, it might cost you $50 or $100 to renew the domain for as long as you can. So that's a nice, easy one. So
yeah,
makes sense.
And with especially on the domain, with .com and all increasing the prices every year nowadays. So it makes sense to just go ahead. It is important. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the basics. So let's talk about advanced stuff. So the basic stuff will get you from slow to okay or fast enough. This stuff is really, we want to push the speed further. So let's run through these quickly, and you guys can stop me as we go along. So object caching, which is database caching, really important for WooCommerce and Cloudways. You guys have this built in. So there's two components. You need a server app, so Memcached or Redis, and then you need a plugin inside WooCommerce. So you guys have the Object Cache Pro plugin on your plans, which you have one click and it installs this. So really super simple. And that'll make a huge difference, particularly to cart, checkout, backend managing orders, users logging into their account. It will make a really big difference there. So that one's really easy.
Object Cache Pro is actually $99 a pop, and Cloudways is
giving it for free. Yeah. Yeah, we're giving it for free for most plans that can support it. Yeah, I think only the smallest one does not have it, because you just don't have enough RAM for that. But
exactly.
So
that's a no-brainer.
A little bit more.
We see WooCommerce sites all the time, even on Cloudways, with that just not installed, and it's like install it takes 2 or 3 minutes, and you're good to go. All right, the next one, edge caching for HTML. So Enterprise Cloudflare or Cloudflare APO. So Cloudflare APO is only $5 a month, so it's dirt cheap. But basically that caches the pages at the Cloudflare server level. They have 200 plus locations now. So if your hosting is in the US and you're in Australia, then it's going to load off one of the 6 locations in Australia. So it removes the impact of geography to a degree. But the other thing it enables the site to do is take way more load. You can get 2 to 50x more users on the same site, because Cloudflare is going to do so much more of the work. So it's particularly for WooCommerce, it's a no-brainer. So really a must-have. And going hand in hand with that is something called just-in-time preloading. There is a few different ways to do it. There is a demo at this site, instant.page. So basically, when a user's hovering around with their mouse, there is a gap between when they hover and when they click. So in that gap, that could be half a second, and that's enough time to background load the page. So that's what just-in-time preloading is. As the user hovers on something, it starts loading before they click. So it does a few things. It actually speeds up the website for them, but it also makes things like Enterprise Cloudflare or edge caching work better, because Cloudflare can start loading that, and it reduces that time to first byte metric. So instant.page is standalone free, or WP Rocket plugin also does it. So.
Breeze has it as well. Just want to share that. we call it preload links. So we have it, I think, from earlier this year. We in Breeze 2.0.
James is not missing any opportunities. And James is
good.
All here.
Yeah, I'll I mean, when you have a good feature and it's free, why not?
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Exactly. Cool. JavaScript optimization. This is really important for WooCommerce. So there's a few different ways or layers to this. So one is remove it. So any plugins you're not using, remove them. Any old scripts you're not using, remove them. So often we see people with half a dozen A/B testing tools, Hotjar, Lucky Orange, crazy heat maps, just multiple tools that nobody's using anymore, that remove them, and automatically you're going to speed up the website. Put the JavaScript lower on the site. So JavaScript is executed in the order it appears. So you don't want to have stuff at the top of the website or the header of the website when it can be in the footer, and it doesn't make any difference to how it performs, like Google Analytics, for example. So putting it lower on the website makes it load later, which means that more resources can be used to render the site and display the site. Deferring it, so turning on JavaScript defer, which means that JavaScript is executed again later in the load process, and then delaying it. So one technique we have For some heavy JavaScript, like live chat tools are almost always very heavy because they're a whole web app. Take that code, put it in Google Tag Manager, and then add a 5-second delay into it. So it doesn't really affect how the live chat performs, but it does remove it completely from that load render window. So the website loads 5 seconds later, then the live chat loads, as opposed to them competing with each other for performance. And then don't combine JavaScript. That will slow it down on the modern web. And the same as CSS, don't combine CSS. It almost always will make it slower. Does that make sense? It's a bit technical, I think.
Yeah. It's big, that I think that relates to HTTP 2 as well, because it loads sequentially instead of one. So it loads parallelly, one together instead of one after another. But do you agree that I think there's some confusion here as well when it comes to especially CSS and JavaScript combining, because a lot of caching plugins still offers that as an option. And when that's an option, a lot of people just I'm just gonna hit enable it because nobody says no, right?
Exactly. Yeah, especially JavaScript will go much slower if you combine it. The reason is, especially on a WooCommerce site, a WooCommerce site might have 50 or 100 files, and the file is processed serially. So if there is something at the end of the file that is required for the page render, all the stuff before that needs to be processed before it gets to the end of the file. Right. Whereas if they were all individual files, they would process in a much more efficient order. So that's one big reason why you shouldn't combine them, because kind of in a similar way, it's kind of the flip side of that HTTP 2 thing. So
I think let's send out a message to all the caching plugins authors. Please stop offering the options because people are just going to enable it.
Yeah, there are a few very small cases where it can help, but 8 years ago, yes, but on the modern web, definitely not. So okay, so CSS, similar thing. So don't combine it. There are plugins that most caching plugins and optimization plugins have a way of inlining some or all of the CSS to optimize it. Let's talk about database optimization. This is also a big one that particularly important for older websites. So if you have a WooCommerce site that's 5+ years old, you might be running these older database tables. So there are two formats that WordPress can use for its database tables. So there is the newer format, InnoDB, and then there's the older format, MySum. And the older format's much slower. So with the older format, when the database is writing something to the database table, then all the other writes have to queue up. They can only do one write at a time, or that table's locked while the write is being done. With this newer format, well, it's not really new anymore, but this other format, only the row in the database table is locked when it's being written to. So think about it in the terms of if you had a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, people email that around and only one person can edit it at once. So that's going to be slow. The InnoDB is more like having a Google Sheet where more than one person can work on it at a time. So if you have the older table format, database table format in WooCommerce, it is actually going to make it really slow. So particularly checkouts will be slow because you have multiple people doing checkouts at once. And managing orders in the back end. So converting the database tables, this is quite technical, so you definitely want a dev to do this, but converting the tables to InnoDB will speed them up, and then adding indexes to some of the tables will also speed them up. This is important for bigger WooCommerce sites, or bigger or busier WooCommerce sites. It will make quite a difference.
So I have some questions here. Sure. What do you think of? Have you seen over the years? There are a lot of plugins that help you convert the database. Do you see any issues with them so far, or have they been working properly? Yeah,
generally there is a plugin, SiteSpeedBot Optimizer. So we will use that for if the database is fairly small, well, mid-size, 1 to 2 gigabytes, it'll work fine. If you have a big database that's say 10 gigabytes for a busier site, it won't work because it's doing the work in PHP, so it times out and has these other issues that you definitely want to do it on the database in PHP MyAdmin or the database manager. So
and for the indexes, that's something that I've seen, but I don't really know what that means. Just a simple way of not too not too deep on nobody will understand. But just a simple maybe I can understand personally.
A simple DIY. If if you're DIYing using this Bolt Optimizer plugin, we'll do both. It'll do the conversion and the indexes. The index is like a dictionary or like an index in a book. It's an easier way for the database lookups to find the data that they're looking for. Makes sense?
Right.
So
okay, yeah.
So adding an index to a table will speed up queries on a big table. So
okay,
that makes sense. But yeah, if you don't really understand, if you're listening to this and don't understand, you really need a developer to do it. Don't DIY it, because if you break the database, that's a problem. And goes without saying, before you make any changes, make sure you have backups. So
backups always. Yeah.
This plugin here, Query Monitor, is really good. It's a free plugin. It's really good at troubleshooting errors that are happening under the bonnet. So if you have things going slow in the back end, so you're loading up an orders page in the back end, it's taking 10 or 20 seconds. This plugin will often uncover errors that are happening at the PHP level or at the database level with that particular page, or even on the front end of the site. If the checkout is slow or something slow, this can be a really good way to troubleshoot those issues, and it will show you if there's an error happening, and then you can kind of trace it down and fix it. Often we'll see, especially WooCommerce, if you're using paid plugins, often they don't show as needing updates in the WordPress backend. But if you bought that plugin off ThemeForest or somewhere like that, you might actually have to manually go and look for those updates. And we very often see issues with errors happening with those plugins that Query Monitor will show them up. Cloudflare firewall rules. So we have a link to this post on our website. One powerful way of using Cloudflare is to add a firewall rule to filter traffic going to the My Account page and the WP admin login page. And that the typical WordPress website gets 1,000 to 10,000 brute force attacks a day or attempts a day. And using Cloudflare firewall rules, we can filter a lot of that stuff out. So Cloudflare deals with it. Mm-hmm. Again, especially WooCommerce SEO crawlers, so SEMrush and Ahrefs can be extremely aggressive on WooCommerce sites. They'll add and remove things to the cart or wish list multiple times a second and just chew up server resources. So again, in that blog post, we show you how to block those crawlers. So that can reduce the load on the website quite substantially. So those are simple ones. And any version of Cloudflare will do it, even the free version. So that's nice and simple. Check for 404 errors. So just do a site-wide 404 check, and any SEO audit tool will do that, because 404 errors are always bad. They're bad for users, bad for speed, bad for SEO. So that's a simple one almost nobody does. Uptime monitoring we talked about, and then Core Web Vitals monitoring.
So Brendan, for 404, I mean, there are tools that do that for you. Like if you run a website through that tools, they do indicate all the 404s that there are on your website. So do you suggest any specific tool to use for that?
We use Screaming Frog SEO Spider. We really like it.
Screaming Frog, okay.
Yeah, it's a bit technical though. But any SEO tool will really do it. So two things you're looking for is site-wide 404 errors. Like quite often there'll be something in the footer that's broken. There might be an image that's broken across the site. So when you have a site-wide 404 error, it affects the speed of everything. And it will manifest in weird ways. Some devices, the website will just be really slow to load, or it will do weird things. And then on important pages, obviously, key pages or busy category pages or busy product pages. So, doing that once a month is really important.
Okay.
Websites approve 404s. The other one is for websites that sell one-time products. So over time, they will accrue 404 errors if those pages aren't redirected somewhere else. So if you have a business that's selling one-time products or limited edition products, it's important to 301 redirect those old product pages back to the category or back to, or to the new version of that product or whatever it is. And that's often neglected. And that'll affect speed, it'll affect user experience, and it'll have a huge effect on SEO over time. So we've seen a lot of clients in our agency, and we've seen a lot of clients at WP SpeedFix have that issue with those one-time products that, often is totally neglected or unknown. Google Search Console is also really good. Digging around in there, it'll show you 404s that Google is finding. So that's also a useful place to go poking around for kind of problems or errors that are they're related to speed, but they're also related to SEO. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. A lot of the tools that you mentioned, I mean, our team uses that on a daily basis, especially Google Search Console. And that's a very handy tool, especially for the SEO stuff.
Yeah, it's especially important for WooCommerce, I think, because you can have 1,000 products or 10,000 products, and it's without using tools, it's impossible to kind of handle a site that big. So, okay, got a couple more things. So let's talk about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, things to be specifically mindful of, and just, I guess, sales in general, holiday sales or whatever. So the logged in speed versus the logged out speed. So the logged in users typically aren't cached. So by default, Cloudflare edge caching will turn itself off for a logged in user, and most page caching turns off for logged in users. So this is something to be mindful of. You can cache logged in users, generally speaking. So most caching plugins allow you to turn on caching for them, but you need to make sure it doesn't break your site in weird ways. So that would be something that needs to be tested with devs, or have a dev test it and make sure it doesn't break anything. But that would be a potential gap where there's an issue. If you have 100 or 1,000 people logged into your site at once, they're all going to be quite slow and also have quite a drain on the server resources if they're not cached. The second one's very, very common. If you're running ads or doing a mail out blast or email blast, and you add custom query strings onto that mail out blast to track it and analytics or whatever, often it will it'll turn off the caching or bypass the caching. So if you send a mail out to 50,000 people at once with a query string, we actually had this with a client just the other day. They sent a mail out blast and they had 250 people hit the site in 1 minute, and none of those people were cached, and the site started throwing 502 and 504 errors because the hosting wasn't matched to that. So that's important to be mindful of. And then stagger the mailouts. Don't send to 50,000 people in one hit. Spread it out over an hour or two, stagger it out. So, because again, you can make the website fast with caching, but that doesn't necessarily mean the checkout can handle, a checkout happening every second or something like that. So those are important considerations. But yeah, I think that's everything we had on the list. You guys have any questions about those?
Yeah, so you mentioned that using custom query strings from ads and mail out. So what's the alternative? I mean, people usually use those. I mean, so what can people do?
There are query strings that, like common query strings that most plugins and tools are aware of, like Google Analytics UTM strings. Those are totally fine. If you just make up your own query strings, that can be problematic. So it's probably worth checking if your particular query string you're using or your tool is how it's handled by both Cloudflare if you're using it and by whatever caching plugin you're using. So most are aware of some query strings, like the popular ones, like even MailChimp query strings. But if you're using some weird, unique tool or you just added your own query strings, that'll be a problem. So in this case, they added their own query string onto their mail out in ActiveCampaign, and that's what caused the issue. So all those 250 users at once, it was 10,000 people on the list, but it was 250 people in a minute, and none of them had a cache session, so it was just too much for the hosting to handle. So yeah, something to be mindful of, particularly with big sales.
Good point about I'm just thinking, creating your own query string. don't try to be smart on that. Because I think a lot of caching plugin they do like take into account like the basic one, the UTM source and all. Those
Facebook
are quite
and
basic,
the big
right?
tools. Yeah. So, but staggering the mailouts as well is also an important one. It's exciting to send a big blast like that, but most tools allow you to send so many mails per hour or something like that, which is also better from a deliverability perspective as well. If you stagger them, typically the deliverability will be better too.
Yeah, well, I think that was amazing, fantastic session, Brendan. A lot of things that even James, the smart one over here, didn't know. So
no. So, Brendan is a smart one.
So thank you so much, Brendan. That was an amazing session. A lot of people who are listening to this must have gotten some useful information out of this session that they can use in their BFCM preparation. So before we say goodbye, Brendan, I have one last question from you.
Sure.
So and that question is, what are your thoughts, any final words on the experience that you have had of being here? I mean, this is the second year that you have been here with us in the BFCM Prepathon. So how has your experience been this year?
With the Prepathon?
Yeah.
great, I guess. I haven't really put much thought into it, to be honest. So, yeah.
All right, so I will run with it. So great, that's your experience. I agree. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brandon, for joining us all the way from Australia. And folks, we are not done yet, because tomorrow we have a number of cool sessions on security. One of which is website security for a successful BFCM campaign. So stay tuned in. We will be back tomorrow, and we are wrapping up day 3 today. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a safe day. Enjoy, and see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.